Hello, you're watching Breakfast with Charlie State and Nagat Munchetti. Time now, 8:33.
So Labour has welcomed two by-election victories in which they overturned big Conservative majorities from the last election. You'll know that this morning. Those votes came in overnight, and we have the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, with us here this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. What happened overnight in those two by-elections?
Well, understandably, we're very pleased with those results. These were huge swings to Labour. The Wellingborough one was the second biggest swing in a by-election since the Second World War, so this is a very significant swing. I think there is a message now from these by-elections. We had a number of them last year, as you remember. I think the country is crying out for change. Everybody knows that things aren't working. Their NHS isn't working. They've got a cost-of-living crisis. I think they've concluded that the Tories have failed after 14 years. They can see now the Labour Party has changed. It's a different party to the party in 2019. And they can see that we've got the answers to their problems. And I was very pleased last night to see that we were clearly getting Tory switchers. In other words, people who hadn't voted for the Labour Party before, coming out last night and voting for the Labour Party in a by-election. And I think that vindicates, if you like, or is evidence. But I would say this, particularly to my team, there is more work to do. There is always more work to do. There's a long way to go before this election. And as every football fan knows, you don't win the league by a good win in February. Okay. So we've got to keep at this. We've got to earn every vote. Let
me put a thought to you, which is it is one thing, and it's manifest when you look at the results, that the Tory vote is disappearing. There are problems in terms of the way people are seeing the Conservative Party. And you have just won those two by-elections, and that is also clear. But do you feel like, as Keir Starmer, future potential Prime Minister, that this is a glowing endorsement of you?
I think that if you look at these two results, you can see the vindication of the hard work that I've done as leader and that we've done together as leader. And I'll tell you why. Just take Wellingborough as an example, because I know you will have no end of Tory spokespeople out today saying it's a by-election, it's mid-term, which it isn't anymore, by the way. It's low turnout. In Wellingborough, yes, there's a low turnout. That tends to be the position in by-elections. But more people voted Labour yesterday than voted Labour in 2019, despite the low turnout. Now, that is not possible unless people who didn't vote Labour before have come over to us and been persuaded.
You've slightly deflected the question, which is whether you see it as if you like, a glowing endorsement of you. If the predictions come true and Labour wins the general election, you will be Prime Minister. Yes. Now, do you see this as a glowing endorsement of you? Well,
the only reason I deflect the question, I don't tend to personalise it. But yes, I'm very proud of that result. I'm proud of the work that I've done as leader. That, as I say, was the second biggest swing since the Second World War. We've had a lot of Labour leaders in that period. I've changed the Labour Party, and we brought in a very good result last night. I don't want to get in the warm bath of saying job done, which is why I'm not deflecting, but don't want to completely absorb your question, because my message to my team is there is more work to do. We've got a long way to go. We have to keep making our positive case, and we have to earn every vote. I say that to my team, and I say every week we must fight like we're 5 points behind. And we will fight like we're 5 points behind, because what's at stake in this election is so huge. It's the chance to go from 14 years of decline to a decade of national renewal, a chance to bring your bills down, a chance to have better public services.
So you are talking about
a chance to change our country for the better. There's so much at stake that we must fight so hard for every vote.
You can do that with policies, but whether or not it's comfortable talking about yourself and putting yourself front and centre of a Labour victory, it is a fact that people vote for Prime Ministers. People vote for people when they vote for Prime Ministers. What are you working on yourself to become more appealing in a general election year?
Well, look, I'm working on how to be the best leader I can be of the Labour Party in very difficult circumstances. I had the opportunity to pick the Labour Party up in 2019 after our worst election results since 2035.
Which in some ways is an easier way to do it when you're picking up from a low point. But now you're here.
Just hear me out, because I accept the argument that if you start from a low point, then you tend to make progress. But the progress we've made from the worst results since 1935 to being now credible contenders, and that's all we are, for the 2024 election. I have to say, when I took over as leader, most people shook me by the hand and said, good luck here. And in the next breath, they said, you will never do this in one 5-year parliamentary term. Most people didn't think it was possible. We're trying to do, if you like, what Kinnock, what Smith and Blair did over 13 or 14 years in 4 short years. Now, you know, I am pleased with the progress we've made. We are a changed party. People can see that. That's why people who didn't vote Labour before are now voting Labour, sometimes for the first time. That is vindication. But there's so much more that needs to be done because this is going to be a long year. There's a lot of work to do. We have to fight, fight, fight.
And every vote is...
Because of what's at stake for the country. We cannot carry on like this.
I'm conscious we have 3 more minutes with you. So a couple of things I want to talk to you about. The week you've had, the last week you've had, has been described as one of the worst, that's it, one of the worst weeks in your leadership, OK? And the reference to that...
We have just had 2 massive by-election wins
up until the
Friday.
by-election results. And the reference to that, the reason that has been described, that you will be well aware, is you've had to suspend 2 parliamentary candidates over comments regarding anti-Semitism,
yes.
Perceived as anti-Semitic.
Yes.
And there has been a lot of criticism about you delaying that first suspension and then reacting to the second suspension. It's kind of part of the reason I'm asking you about you. And when you came and you declared that, you said that anti-Semitism would be driven out of the Labour Party, and yet there were these delays.
Yeah.
Whether or not you are stepping up to the promises you made, and you're going to be seen as them, and I won't, and you'll be aware of the U-turn argument as well, various U-turns that have been made under your leadership.
Can I take both those things
Please.
Absolutely head on? Because I've had to take 2 tough decisions in the last 10 days. The first was to change our plan in relation to the £28 billion of investment that we wanted to put into the economy under the Green Prosperity Plan. Because of the damage that the Tories have done to the economy, I had to change my plans. Now, I don't think the Tory attack that says you had to change your plans because we broke the economy is as good as they think it is. Because many people watching this programme will have had to change their own plans, where they're going on holiday, what they're doing at Christmas, how much they can afford in the supermarket because the Tories have broken the economy. But I had to take that tough decision, and I took it because I'm not prepared to make a promise that I can't keep, and I will not make a promise I can't keep. In relation to the second point you put to me, I did something that no leader of the Labour Party has ever done before, which is to remove a candidate in a by-election where they cannot be replaced, because I was so determined to take decisive action in relation to anti-Semitism.
Was it quick?
And it's a reminder... Well,
a decision is a decision. You can say it's decisive. You did it, but was it quick enough?
It was decisive. It's never been done before.
Was it done quickly enough?
And look, it was done within days. And I think it was to remove a candidate in a by-election who cannot be replaced is not a small matter. It's not the same as simply removing a whip. It is a massive decision for any political leader to take.
There's an offensive comment against a community.
Because, in effect, we are giving up a Labour seat. Now, it's the right thing to do, but what it shows is when there's tough decisions to be made, I take those decisions. That's what I've been doing for 4 years, taking tough and ruthless decisions to change this party. I've taken 2 tough and ruthless decisions in the last 10 days. Has it been bumpy?
Are you going to be doing them, making them quicker?
Has it been bumpy? Yes, of course it's been bumpy. But were they the right decisions is the question I ask myself as we get to Friday, tail end of the week. And they were the right decisions.
Mr Starmer, politicians are often accused of just waiting and seeing what the mood music is. And people feel that about your decision-making. You say you waited 24 hours to assess things. What you're actually doing and your people are doing is, which way is this going? How's it playing? And people are cynical about that, and they think that's the game you're playing.
I don't think that's fair. If you look at the record of the last 4 years, I've taken decisive action against the ex-leader of the Labour Party, who will not even be standing as a Labour candidate at the next election. People could accuse me of many things, but I do not think they can accuse me of a failure to take tough and ruthless decisions which other leaders
in a timely fashion.
Not ever taken before. Nobody has ever said to a former Labour leader, you won't stand as a Labour candidate in the next election.
You do know
Nobody's
what we're
ever
saying.
removed a candidate
We're talking
before.
about not making the decision, not taking the decision. Yes, you took the decisions. but in a timely fashion. The delays that come to taking crucial decisions, that is what you are being criticised for.
I think it's worth getting this in some perspective. This was a question of something coming to light on the Sunday, and by Monday he was removed as the candidate. We're not talking about something which dragged on for weeks on end. But the question, look, after a tough week, I ask myself is, did I take the right decisions? And the answer, I am confident, is yes. Has the work we've been doing to change the Labour Party persuaded Tory switchers to vote for us again? And the evidence from last night is yes. So,
OK.
you know, we are, but a long way to go, more work to do, of course.
All right, I understand that. I have one more question for you, and I don't think we had the chance to talk to you about this. That moment in the Commons, when you were facing Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister's questions, and Esther Chai was in the Commons building, and you said shame on you to Rishi Sunak.
Yeah.
Did something change in the way you thought about the man opposite you on that day? Because a lot of people look very closely at your demeanour and your attitude, and suddenly it felt quite personal. Did something change?
Something went through me in that moment, because I knew
Sorry,
Esther...
no, I don't want to go through that whole argument again. People understand that. My question to you is very specific about whether, looking at the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, you thought about him differently. Did something fundamentally change about what people see as maybe some respect between the two of you? Did something change?
Yes, because I think that whichever political party you're in, whoever you are, and I try not to pick personal fights with those that I'm against in politics, I think the job of the Prime Minister is to rise above all other politicians and to make sure that every single citizen in this country, whatever their identity, whatever their background, ethnicity or anything else, feels safe and respected, whichever way they vote.
Does he have your respect anymore?
He has lost some of my respect because of his response in relation to that, because this is fundamental to me. I genuinely believe the Prime Minister of all people should rise above and be able to speak to and for the nation. And every citizen should feel safe and respected. That is a bare minimum. And I thought he crossed a line when he said what he said. Whatever his views on the issues in question, I thought he crossed a line, and that's why I was genuinely shocked.
Our apologies to your team, because I think we've pushed you slightly over your time that you were designated for us, so I hope that's OK.
Thanks for having me again.
So, Keir Starmer, thank you very much. Let's talk to our political editor, Chris Mason. Chris, good morning to you. So you're in Wellingborough, one of the places of victory for the Labour Party. What are your thoughts? What are you reflecting on this morning?
Yeah, morning to you, Nag. A couple of things to tease out, I think, from that conversation, fascinating conversation you just had with Keir Starmer there. The context here is one of Labour winning two colossal victories, both here in Northamptonshire and in South Gloucestershire. And yet you listen to Keir Starmer, a phrase I scribbled into my notebook during the conversation, that he says they are credible contenders going into the general election. He is desperate not to sound remotely complacent, even though the evidence is now stacking up, not just in opinion polls, but in by-election after by-election after by-election, of Labour not just winning, but winning big. And winning big, in another phrase that I jotted into my notebook during the conversation, in what Keir Starmer acknowledged had been a tough week with all of those rows about anti-Semitism, and crucially how he handled them, where it looked for 24 hours or so like Labour were condemning in words the comments of their then candidate in Rochdale, but effectively condoning in actions by not removing him, which of course in the end they did. So they're the two things I think I would tease out from what we heard from Keir Starmer there, on what is, as I say, a day that you would expect him to be on something of a victory lap, but his tone very conscious, I think, that the real contest still a few months away with the general election. He doesn't want to look like he's getting remotely carried away.
And of course, Chris, we spoke to Richard Holden, the chairman of the Conservative Party, earlier, and there was no denial that, you know, these by-elections, I think there have been 10 so far during this Parliament, they hurt, and there's work to be done in the Conservative Party to put across a better message, or a message that's more appealing to potential voters.
Yeah, I mean, imagine being Richard Holden this morning, clambering out of bed if he's been to bed at all, and having to come and talk to you and Charlie and others, and what can he say? It was a pretty desperate night for the Conservatives on a couple of fronts. Firstly, they see the onward march of Labour, and then secondly, the performance of Reform UK, the party that came out of UKIP and the Brexit Party. Ben Habib, who was the Reform UK candidate here in Wellingborough, on something of a victory lap this morning. Not a victory because he won, but a victory of influence lap, because Reform are polling in by-elections as well as the opinion polls now to an extent where they frighten the Conservatives. So 13% of the vote here in Wellingborough, and a share of the vote in Kingswood that was greater than the difference between the Conservatives and Labour. And you have those within the Conservatives who now not only fear that march of Labour, but fear Reform as well, because they make an argument that makes Keir Starmer's passage towards Downing Street easier. Reform make the argument that they think the Conservatives have been so diabolical in recent years that they deserve all they can get. And as things stand, they look like they're going to play a really influential role come the general election, even without necessarily winning a single seat.
Chris, always good to talk to you. There's our political editor, Chris Mason, for us in Wellingborough.